It was supposed to be a short stop. I had ducked into the little cafe off Main Street, the one that always smelled like ground beans and old paperbacks, to kill time before meeting a friend. The bell over the door rattled in its usual tired way. I wasn't expecting her. She was at the back, already halfway through a cup, a paperback open beside her saucer. Not reading, just resting her hand on the page as if it held her place in more ways than one. My friend's mom. I almost turned back. She noticed me before I could. A polite nod, like we'd only bumped into each other at the grocery store. But then her eyes lingered just a fraction longer, enough for me to feel it. "Coffee?" she asked when I walked past, as if I might need permission to sit. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded too casual, like it didn't belong to me. The place was half empty, so when I brought my mug over, sitting across from her felt deliberate, even though she didn't object. She folded her napkin once, then again, into a sharp square. Her hands were restless, precise. "You come here often?" I asked. "Not really," she said, smoothing the napkin again, then letting it go. "Just when the house is too quiet." She didn't look at me when she said it. She stirred her cup, though the coffee had already gone cold. I wanted to ask more, but the words backed up somewhere in my throat. Instead, I noticed the way sunlight slipped across the table, catching the tiny lines at the edge of her eyes. She wasn't trying to hide them. Somehow that made her harder to look away from. She remembered my order before I told her. "Latte, right? No sugar." I blinked. "Yeah, you remember that." She gave a small smile. I noticed things. Silence stretched, not awkward, not comfortable either. Just there. I took a sip, and the sound of the spoon against her cup filled the space like punctuation. When she finally asked about my classes, I talked too quickly. About deadlines, about the apartment I shared with two guys who never did dishes. She laughed softly, a sound that barely reached her shoulders but stayed in her eyes. It wasn't what she said, but the pauses. The way she looked like she wanted to say something and decided against it. I found myself leaning forward every time, waiting. Later, after we left separately, I sat in my car longer than I needed to. Phone in my hand. Her number glowing from an old text chain where she'd once sent directions to their house for a barbecue. My thumb hovered above the keyboard. Typed, erased, typed again. "Nice seeing you today." I didn't send it. That night, lying in bed, the words replayed anyway. Her quiet laugh. The napkin folded neatly beside her cup. The way she looked at me before she said goodbye, like she wanted me to know something without saying it. I almost convinced myself it didn't matter. Almost. Until the screen lit up. A message. From her. "Don't stay up too late." Simple. Unassuming. But I read it 3, 4 times, each word bending under its own weight. And I knew. Sleep wasn't going to come easily. The message from her sat on my phone all night. I didn't reply. I just stared until the screen dimmed, then lit up again with my thumb. A single line, simple enough to pass for casual, but not casual at all. The next time I saw her, it wasn't planned. My friend had forgotten his jacket at her place after a late-night hangout, and I offered to swing by. She opened the door in a cardigan, hair loosely tied back, the kind of look that made her seem younger and older at once. "You came instead of him?" she asked. "He had class." I was closer. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in. It's on the chair." I picked up the jacket, but didn't leave. She poured tea without asking, sliding the mug across the counter like she had already decided I'd stay. We sat at the small kitchen table, steam curling between us. She blew gently on her cup before speaking. "When I was your age," she said, almost as if talking to herself, "I thought 30 was old. Then I blinked, and here I am." She gave a dry laugh. "Strange, isn't it?" I nodded, not sure what to say. She looked out the window, as if expecting the street to answer. The silence wasn't empty, it pressed at me. I found myself studying the way her fingers rested on the mug, the chipped nail polish, the soft bend of her knuckles. Details you only notice when you're paying too much attention. "You ever feel," she said quietly, "like you're living beside your own life? Watching it instead of inside it?" Her words hit harder than I expected. I thought of nights scrolling on my phone until morning, of plans that never happened. "Yeah," I admitted. "All the time." She looked at me then, and something shifted, like she was checking if I really meant it. I wanted to tell her I'd thought about her text, that I'd read it until it felt carved into my head. Instead, I asked about her book. She smiled faintly, recognizing the deflection, but answered anyway. It should have ended there. But when I stood to leave, she reached to straighten the collar of the jacket in my arms. Her hand brushed my shoulder, so light it might have been accidental. But it wasn't. "I'm glad it was you who came," she said. I froze, not sure if she noticed. The air between us felt fragile, stretched thin. I wanted to stay, to let the silence spill into something else. But instead, I managed a half smile and a clumsy, "See you around." When I stepped outside, the cool air felt sharper than it should. I held the jacket tighter, like it carried more than my friend's smell. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I started finding reasons to pass by her street. Not on purpose, at least not at first. But the bookstore was only a block away, and her front steps always seemed to pull at me like gravity. The third time, she caught me. "You again," she said, standing in the doorway with that same cardigan, sleeves tugged down over her wrists. She didn't sound surprised. I was just around. She tilted her head, like she didn't believe me, but let it slide. "Come in, then." I made too much tea. We sat in the living room this time, the jacket I'd returned now draped over the couch arm. She asked about my week. I answered, then asked about hers. The conversation circled, pauses folding between us like extra layers. She leaned back, fingers tapping the side of her mug. "You should be careful," she said suddenly. "Careful." Her eyes flicked toward me, then away. "Spending too much time here. People might wonder." I wanted to laugh it off, but my throat tightened. "Do you?" Her silence answered more than words could. She picked up her tea again, holding it longer than necessary, as if the heat might explain her hesitation. The sound of a door upstairs broke whatever was building. My friend's footsteps. He appeared halfway down, rubbing his eyes. "Oh, hey," he said when he saw me. "Didn't know you were here. Just stopped by," I managed. His mom's expression smoothed into something neutral, practiced. She smiled at him in that easy, motherly way, as if I hadn't just asked a question she couldn't answer. I left soon after, the air between us swallowed by his presence. Later, she texted, "Sorry about earlier." I stared at the words, reading between the lines that weren't there. The next day, I found her at the cafe again. She looked up, startled, then softened. "Persistent, aren't you?" she said. I sat. We didn't talk much, just sat with the sound of spoons and quiet music filling the gaps. At one point, she reached for her bag and her hand brushed mine. She didn't pull back right away. Neither did I. Her eyes lingered on mine for a second too long, and I felt the world tilt, just slightly, toward her. I opened my mouth. She shifted, withdrawing her hand, tucking her hair behind her ear like it gave her something to do. "You should focus on your studies," she said lightly, like it was a joke. But it wasn't. I wanted to say something back, that I couldn't stop thinking about her, that every silence with her felt louder than conversations with anyone else. But the words stuck, suspended between courage and fear. When we stood to leave, we walked side by side to the door. Outside, she touched my arm, a fleeting press of her fingers, and for a moment the city noise blurred. "Take care," she said. Not goodbye. Not yet. Happened on a gray afternoon, the kind of day that blurred into itself. I found her sitting on the park bench near the library, a thermos by her side. She looked surprised when she saw me, then not at all. "You don't give up, do you?" she said, tugging her coat tighter. "Just passing by," I answered, though we both knew better. I sat down, leaving space between us. The air was cool, the kind that made conversation shorter, breaths visible. She poured tea into the thermos lid, held it out. I hesitated, then took it. Our fingers brushed, warm against the cold. "You should be with people your own age," she murmured, almost lost to the wind. "I don't want to be." She looked at me then, eyes sharp, searching. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" My voice cracked more than I wanted. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she twisted the thermos cap until it squeaked. The sound was loud against the quiet. Finally, "Because it isn't fair." "To who?" I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She stared at the path, a couple walking their dog in the distance. "To you." "To him." "To me." The him lingered heavier than the rest. My friend. Her son. I wanted to tell her none of that mattered, but it did. It mattered too much. The silence between us thickened, pressing down until I had to break it. "I keep trying to stay away," I admitted. "But I can't stop thinking about you." Her breath caught, almost imperceptibly. She didn't look at me, but her hands stilled. "You're young," she said softly. You'll forget this. I won't. That made her finally turn. There was something in her gaze I hadn't seen before. Fear, maybe, or recognition. She exhaled slowly. You have no idea how complicated this is. I don't care. The words hung there, too loud, too raw. She blinked, as if steadying herself. Then, quieter. But I do. We sat in silence, both staring straight ahead. My hand twitched, wanting to close the distance, but I held it still. Every second felt stretched thin, fragile. I thought I was done with this part of life, she said after a long pause. Feeling noticed. Wanted. It's easier not to expect it. I swallowed hard. Then why let me stay? Her lips parted, but no answer came. Just a long, quiet inhale, as though she'd almost said it out loud. The dog from earlier barked, breaking the moment. She stood abruptly, brushing off her coat. I should go. I rose too, waiting for her to add something. She didn't. Instead, she glanced at me, her eyes softer than her voice. Don't make me regret this. It wasn't a refusal. It wasn't an agreement either. The question hung there, unspoken. What happens if we don't stop? But almost. The next week, she wasn't at the cafe, or the bench, or anywhere I thought she might be. I told myself I wasn't looking, but I was. Every detour past her street, every glance at the door of the bookstore, all of it gave me the same result. Nothing. When I finally did see her, it was by accident. The grocery store. She was in the produce aisle, hair pulled back, basket hooked on her arm. I almost called out, but then I saw who she was with, my friend. Her son. He was laughing about something, holding a bag of apples like it weighed more than it did. She caught my eye over his shoulder. Just for a second. Her face didn't change, not a flicker. She looked right through me, and then back to him. I walked out without buying anything. After that, she stopped answering texts. The ones I sent were harmless, easy to explain away if anyone saw them. How are you? Did you finish that book? Nothing came back. For days I replayed the park bench in my head. Her words. Her almost answers. That look before she walked away. I wondered if she regretted everything, if she'd decided to erase it before it could stain anything else. Finally, one evening, I gave in and knocked on her door. No answer. Lights were on. I could see the flicker of a TV through the curtain. But no one came. I left before I knocked again. The following morning, a single message appeared on my phone. Not from her, her son. Hey, Mom says thanks again for grabbing my jacket that day. She hasn't been feeling great lately, so I've been around a lot. Let's catch up soon. I read it 3 times. Hasn't been feeling great. That could mean anything or nothing at all. But the timing cut into me like it meant everything. I didn't reply. For the first time, I stayed away. Not from lack of wanting, but from something heavier. The quiet kind of fear that you'll tip a balance too far and break it for good. Nights blurred. I caught myself checking her window when I passed. Her silhouette moved once, shadow against the curtain, but I didn't stop. I typed a message once. I miss you, and stared at it until the letters blurred. My thumb hovered, then erased it all. What stayed wasn't heartbreak. Not quite. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And I didn't know if she ever meant to. It was late when I finally saw her again. Not in a cafe, not in the park, on her doorstep. I hadn't meant to walk by, but the lights were on, spilling warm against the cold street. She opened the door before I could decide whether to knock. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. I know. For a moment, neither of us moved. She folded her arms, not defensive, more like she needed to hold herself together. I shoved my hands into my pockets, fingers digging into fabric just to keep them still. Are you all right? I asked. She gave a small laugh. Dry? That depends what you mean by all right. There was a pause then, long enough for the chill to sneak between us. She stepped aside, wordless invitation. I followed. Inside, the kitchen smelled faintly of chamomile. A single mug sat on the counter, steam already fading. She didn't make another. We just stood there, 2 people filling the same space with everything unsaid. Finally, she leaned against the counter. I've been trying to stop this, she said, voice low. Every time I see you, I tell myself, no more. But then, she trailed off, pressing her lips together. But then, I asked. Her eyes flicked up to mine, quick, then down again. Then you're here. And it feels like I can breathe again. The words sat between us, heavier than anything either of us had said before. I took a step closer, not touching her, just enough that the space changed shape. I don't want to make things harder for you. You already have. She smiled, faint but real. And I let you. The admission cut through me, sharp and tender all at once. I keep thinking, she went on, about what people would say. About my son. About the line I swore I wouldn't cross. But when you're here, none of that feels as loud. Her voice cracked then, just slightly. She turned, bracing both hands on the counter like she needed something solid. I moved without thinking, standing beside her. Close enough that I could see the small tremor in her fingers. I didn't touch her. Not yet. Tell me to go, I said quietly. And I will. She closed her eyes. The kitchen ticked with the sound of the clock on the wall. A car passed outside. Her breath came slow, deliberate. When she opened her eyes, she didn't tell me to leave. Instead, she reached for my hand, hesitating just before her fingers met mine, as if asking a question without words. I didn't pull away. Her hand was warm, steadying. She let out a breath she must have been holding for years. Okay, she whispered. Not a promise. Not a plan. Just the smallest truth we could hold in that moment. And it was enough. It didn't happen all at once. No dramatic choice, no sleepless night that decided everything. Just small routines, shifting slowly until they fit together. I started stopping by her place in the mornings, under the pretense of walking past on my way to class. Sometimes she was already at the kitchen counter, pouring tea into the same chipped mug. Sometimes she'd slide a second cup across to me, still steaming. Other days it was coffee, black, no sugar. She remembered. The park bench became ours, though no one else would have known. On Sundays, we'd sit there, thermos between us, watching dogs chase after sticks. She still folded napkins absent-mindedly, still laughed quietly at things that weren't really jokes. And I found myself memorizing all of it without trying. There were pauses, days when doubt pressed in heavier than the warmth. I'd catch her staring out the window too long, or folding and refolding laundry until her hands stilled. Once, I asked if she regretted any of it. She didn't answer right away. Then no. Just, sometimes I wonder if I'm allowed to be this happy. Her son never asked questions. We didn't give him reasons to. I stayed careful, patient, not out of fear, but because whatever this was didn't need proving. It grew in its own rhythm. Months slipped by. One morning, I noticed her clock on the wall. 8:47 a.m., same time we'd first sat across from each other in that cafe. Latte in my hand, her napkin folded twice, then again. A detail I never told her. She caught me looking. What is it? Nothing, I said, smiling. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. We didn't use big words. Love, forever, fate. They felt too loud for the kind of thing we had. Instead, it showed in smaller ways. The way she set my cup beside hers without asking. The way I stayed to fix the squeaky hinge on her kitchen cabinet. The way silence no longer pressed between us, but softened. One evening, sitting on the bench as the streetlights blinked on, she leaned her head against my shoulder. No one around, no need to explain. Funny, she whispered, how something so impossible ended up feeling this simple. I didn't answer, just placed my hand over hers, steady, certain. And in that quiet, I knew we had arrived, not at an ending, but at a life that finally felt like it belonged to us. A life built from tea, black coffee, 8:47 mornings, and a bench where the world always seemed to slow down. Something only we would ever understand. Engagement close. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?